Alright, hello everybody. My name is Jim and I am a BSW student at Indiana University Northwest. Today I wanted to talk about a certain bill. I wanted to talk about Indiana House Bill number 1093. That's the Information Concerning Certain Disabilities. Me and my group have researched this policy and we wanted to talk about it a little bit and make a little advocacy video for it. Basically, what it is it is an informational bill, and it wants to ensure that parents of prenatally diagnosed children with certain diseases, the biggest one mentioned in the bill is Down syndrome. It wants to make sure that they have information that could help them out with what's going to happen. It wants to get them early information so that it can help them out and kind of help prepare them for what's going to happen. Since it is the main focus, the main disease of the bill, I want to talk a second about Down syndrome. Down syndrome is a chromosomal disorder in which your 21st chromosome has an extra copy. It's a partial or full extra third copy. You're only supposed to have two, and it's a third copy of that chromosome, and has some very distinguishing symptoms. You have very distinguishing facial features. You usually have growth delay, and you also have the mild to moderate learning disabilities. A statistic that actually kind of it was new to me. I did not know this. Was that 1 in every 1,000 children are diagnosed with Down syndrome? I had no idea that that was the case. That is a much higher statistic than I thought it was going to be. So we figured that this could be a very useful bill. It's ensuring that they get their information, and it also guidelines what the information is going to be. So the first thing I want to do is I want to give basically a overview of what the bill is, because these bills, they are written in a very certain language. Anybody who's ever looked at a bill, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. It is written very wordy. It's written very professionally. So I'm going to give kind of a layman's translation for this, more or less. And actually, I have the bill right here, so let's get cracking on this. Section 1. The State Department shall identify current evidence-based written information that concerns the prenatal diagnosis of Down syndrome and any other condition diagnosed prenatally that meets all the following criteria. And then it has a bunch of criteria. It has about 4 things of criteria. The information is designed for use by an expectant parent or parents who receive a prenatal test result for Down syndrome or any other condition diagnosed prenatally. There are multiple other conditions. I'm not going to get into them right now since it focuses mainly on Down syndrome. I'm going to stick to this bill right here. The information does not implicitly or explicitly reference pregnancy termination. That is a big point. It cannot have anything to do with abortion. They are very against that in this particular policy. We're going to talk about that a little bit later to give my and my group's opinion on it. The information is culturally and linguistically appropriate for potential recipients of the information. Extremely important. How would you ever give anybody information if they don't understand what it means or they can't read it? So having information in Spanish or Hungarian, whatever it is that you need to put it into, it should be put into for these people. If not, somebody that speaks the language can help them. If not, we can have something on the internet translated. I'm sure there's an app for it. We got to do something, because if they can't read it or they can't listen to it, how can it help them? And that's what it's all about. It's all about helping people. Part number 4, the information includes a brief description of contact information for state and local advocacy organizations that advocate for people with intellectual and other developmental disabilities, including Down syndrome and other conditions diagnosed prenatally. The information may include information hotlines, resource centers, internet websites, and clearinghouses. Now, basically what that means is we want them to be able to have all the resources that they're going to possibly need for the future. We want them to have parenting classes. We want them to have support groups. We want them to have all these different hotlines and resource centers and all that. We want to get them as much help as physically possible. So we want them to have that information. We want them to know where to call, where to go, who you're going to call, right? We want them to know who you're going to call. We want them to be able to get to these support centers and these group centers and all that stuff to help them prepare for what's going to come in the future. Let's see, Part B. The State Department may approve material submitted by state and local advocacy organizations. That's actually what we're doing, so maybe we can get on that. Wouldn't that be nice? They advocate for people with intellectual and other developmental disabilities, including Down syndrome and other conditions diagnosed prenatally. They repeat themselves a lot in this. But that's very important because legally that's how you have to do things. That's why if you ever seen a movie that's about lawyers and stuff like that, they always have to say things a certain way. And that is to make sure that they have themselves covered at all times. You know, if you don't say it the proper way, you can end up making a mistake of some sort, getting sued, or anything like that. You know, the third party of the first party's party. You know, it's always got to have a certain language to it. And that's why I'm here. That's why I'm talking to you guys today. That's why I'm making sure that everybody understands exactly what this is talking about so that they can make their own judgments and see if they like it. See if they approve of this bill. And if they don't, they can always write one of their representatives and be like, hey, I don't like this bill. We get enough, if somebody makes enough noise about it, I'm sure they'd have to look into it. Or they say, we really like this bill, but we want something else added to it. Maybe some people do actually want something about termination in there because they want the parents to feel like they have every option. You know, making decisions is much easier when you have all the information. You don't want to make decisions with partial information. We're getting back to the topic at hand. I got off on a little tangent there. Moving on to Section 2. The State Department shall do the following. Approve the information identified under Section 1 of this chapter for use by healthcare facilities, healthcare providers that furnish prenatal care or genetic counseling to expectant parents who receive a prenatal test result for Down syndrome or any other condition diagnosed prenatally. So that's basically saying that they're going to approve it based on the stuff that I told you earlier. It's they're taking all those requirements that were in that first section of that bill and they're making it so that the State Department has to enforce this rule. It has to be enforced that these particular types of rules for the information have to be enforced, and they have to provide it. And then the next part is parents of the children diagnosed with Down syndrome or any other conditions diagnosed prenatally. And they make available the information identified under Section 1 of this chapter on the State's Department internet website. So that's basically they have to put all their information online. It has to be available online. It's not just information packets that you get from the doctor or anything like that. Now this is a really good thing because this can solve a lot of the problems that I had with this particular policy. There were a couple of small things like, well, what do you do if somebody say they do have a history of Down syndrome in the family or some other prenatally diagnosed disease that would be covered by this? What do you do if they can't afford the testing? They don't get the information. That's not what we want to do. That's not the way to do it. The information should still be made available to them because they don't know. It could still happen, and it has a higher chance of happening because they've already had it happen in their family before, or if it's by age, because that does also happen. And another thing was a lot of times they don't tell anybody about prenatal testing. One of my colleagues that is involved in this project, she works at a hospital, medical center, and she asked about that. They don't actually tell you about prenatal testing unless you are an at-risk type of patient, unless you have a history in your family, or if you have, or if the woman is older. So it's kind of like, I mean, what did they do if it happens to them? Like, that's not really fair to them because they didn't know. But if it was made available and at least like spoken about, or at least they told them about the prenatal testing. At least they'd have the option to possibly go through with it. They could be like, okay, well, I assume that there's nothing going to be wrong, but you know what? We can do this testing anyway, and just see what happens, just to make sure, just as a precautionary measure, because they don't offer it up front. Especially since not only do you have to do the prenatal testing, but you have to test for specific things. It has to be actually tested for some of these particular diseases. Not all prenatal tests are the same, so it has to be tested for these. And by at least mentioning it to everybody, no matter who they are, young, old, family, no family history, at least giving them the option is doing the best you can at the time. And at least you're giving them that possible choice. And that is, I think that's really helpful. Um, the other things I would like to see with the bill, I wouldn't mind seeing something about possible termination. The pro-choice side of me says yes. The pro-life side of me says no. It's a very gray area, but I go with the fact that it is just that they should have all information, all options available to them. That's really like the most important thing, because that's the best way to make an informed decision. I mean, and I can understand it can get very iffy, especially if they're very pro-life. I mean, if they're extremely pro-life, they might get offended by it even being in there. So it's a very touchy subject, but I think it would be greatly helpful. Or it could completely backfire, because by putting that in there, um, it is mentioned in the project that we're doing that it could be very overwhelming. Just the shock of them having the test, it coming back with something wrong, and all this information being piled on them, and then you have something like that in there. It could have the opposite effect and make them want to do it, or even if it's not in there, just the information in general and the shock of the test, that could also make them want to do it. That's a kind of an unintended consequence of this whole bill. By providing this information, it's possible that they can get overwhelmed and almost feel like maybe I can't handle it, and think that either adoption or termination is the only possible route. That's not necessarily what we want to do. That's not what we want to do. Um, we want to have everybody to have options. We don't want to try to, or we don't want to accidentally force anybody into anything. That's not what this is about. It's just about information. So our thoughts on the bill are pretty simple. We very much agree with the bill. I think it's a very good idea. It is definitely good to get information out to people and allow them to make informed decisions. There are small possible, indirect consequences, but for the most part, we do very much agree with this bill. There's also a couple of things that we might think that would be quality to add, but overall, we think this is a step in the right direction. It is a good bill. It's good that this information is getting out. It's good that these people have this information available to them, and we do support this bill, and we're hoping that it passes very soon. We will be mailing this video to all of the sponsors, all of the the author, pardon me, the author and the co-authors that have started this bill, and then we're going to email them the link for the video and allow them to look at it, check it out, possibly spread it to their fellow representatives who are voting for it, or even use it as an educational tool. And we're posting it on YouTube, and hopefully some people will come around and take a look at it, and if it helps anybody understand this bill better, we've done our job, and that makes us happy. So thank you all for listening. Appreciate your time. Everybody have a good night. Thanks.